Hello, friend. Before we open the first page of tonight's unsettling file, let me ask you something simple. From where are you watching right now, and what time glows on the clock beside you? Midnight in New York, dawn in London, twilight in Tokyo. Wherever you are, pause for a moment and notice the stillness around you. The hum of your room, the shadows shifting on the wall, the faint flicker of your screen. This is not a story for daylight. This is a tale meant for the hours when the world grows quiet, when the hidden things rise just enough for us to sense them. Tonight, I'll guide you into one of the most mysterious and chilling accounts whispered through the corridors of secrecy, a true X-file, buried in desert stone and guarded by silence. Prepare yourself. What follows is not a bedtime story meant to soothe, but one meant to haunt. Chapter 1: The Shapeshifters of Dulce Base. The story begins not in some remote jungle or ancient ruin, but beneath the sandstone mesas of northern New Mexico, where the small town of Dulce sits in silence, guarded more fiercely by its legends than its sheriff's department. Dulce is not famous for tourism, nor does it lure travelers with desert festivals or neon casinos like its neighbors. Instead, it is whispered about in old radio shows, obscure government documents, and the memoirs of intelligence officers who lived long enough to regret what they signed. The legend: a vast underground base carved into the Archuleta Mesa, where military personnel, covert scientists, and, if eyewitnesses are to be believed, beings not of this earth operate side by side. Most X-files remain locked away, shredded into unrecognizable fragments, but fragments are enough. One 1979 declassified DIA memo mentions anomalous cooperative research facilities near Dulce, cross-referencing energy projects with terminology so vague it reads more like misdirection than fact. Still, when you begin to stack reports, cattle mutilations stretching back to the late 60s, radar interference sweeping the mesas, and helicopter activity unaccounted for in any flight registry, you see the outline of something more than myth. The unsettling part is not just the military presence, which locals routinely spot in unmarked black helicopters buzzing the mesas, but the accounts of what lies beneath. In 1990, a former security technician named Phil Schneider emerged, badly scarred, claiming he had once worked inside the Dulce installation. His testimony, though dismissed by mainstream press, painted a chilling picture: a 7-level complex jointly operated by U.S. officials and entities Schneider called Greys. According to his description, the lower levels were laboratories, not just for genetic experimentation, but for crossbreeding programs, projects allegedly splicing human and non-human DNA with the intent of engineering beings resilient to Earth's changing atmosphere. He claimed he saw vats of what he could only describe as nutrient soup, with partially formed bodies floating inside, their features twisted between familiar and unrecognizable. His death in 1996, ruled a suicide, did little to calm suspicion. Researchers who examined his body reported unusual ligature marks, inconsistent with self-infliction. His papers and lecture tapes vanished, yet the damage was done. Dulce's reputation as a nightmare nexus had burned itself into conspiracy lore. Skeptics argue that these tales are no more than Cold War paranoia, exaggerated accounts of experimental biolabs testing on livestock. But the data pushes against such dismissal. In the 1970s alone, New Mexico recorded more than 2,000 cattle mutilations, most with surgical precision, organs removed without surrounding tissue damage, no blood left behind, and in many cases, no tracks leading to or from the site. Veterinarians brought in by ranchers claimed laser-like incisions decades before surgical lasers were in practical use. More chilling, Geiger counters often registered low-level radiation around carcasses. State police investigated, but were met with silence from higher agencies. FBI documents later admitted that the mutilations followed no known pattern, but acknowledged possible connection to classified defense research. If this was merely pranksters or predators, they left behind signatures that still baffle scientists. Then came the rumors of the 1979 Dulce War. Schneider claimed that while expanding tunnels beneath Archuleta, drill teams accidentally broke into a chamber that was not natural cavern, but constructed facility already occupied. What followed was a firefight between human security forces and beings described as humanoid but taller, with obsidian eyes and translucent skin. Schneider alleged that dozens died before the breach was sealed. To skeptics, it sounds like science fiction, yet fragments of corroboration exist. Locals reported hearing deep subterranean booms in that exact year, followed by weeks of unusual military air activity. Police logs show spikes in 911 calls describing strange lights above the mesa in September 1979, though no follow-up investigations exist in the records. If Schneider's story is fabrication, it is one disturbingly synchronized with unrelated data. The chilling implication is that Dulce Base is not just research, but integration, a blending of human infrastructure with something alien, something that may not need air or light the way we do, but still finds utility in our planet's raw resources. Energy logs from the 1980s show unexplained surges in the Four Corners power grid, surges aligned with testimony of pulses coming from beneath the mesa. Seismic studies, too, show anomalies, repeating vibrations at intervals too regular to be tectonic. If the Black Pyramid in Alaska hums with planetary resonance, Dulce may be its laboratory counterpart, a place where that resonance is exploited rather than contained. And if so, one wonders, what kind of experiments require not just cattle, but human subjects, if even half the whispers about abductions and disappearances are true? The deeper you look into Dulce, the more the silence becomes deafening. For if there truly are 7 levels beneath Archuleta Mesa, then the lowest one, rumored to be entirely off limits to human personnel, may hold something we were never meant to witness, something watching us as we argue about whether or not it exists. Chapter 2. The Disappearance at Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta, a snow-capped volcano in Northern California, is beautiful enough to be a tourist postcard, but its reputation is stained by centuries of strange disappearances, glowing orbs, and whispers of ancient civilizations living inside its hollow chambers. To most, it is a hiking destination. To those who listen to local tribal stories, it is a threshold. The Shasta legends stretch back to the Klamath people, who spoke of the Sky People descending in fire and light, retreating back into the mountain's heart when their tasks were done. In the 1800s, settlers recorded sightings of tall, pale figures robed in white, carrying strange tools that shimmered in the sun. Theosophists of the 20th century declared Shasta to be home of the Lemurians, survivors of a lost continent, guarding their crystal cities inside caverns carved by hands or claws, unknown to us. Dismiss these as myth if you will, but the modern record is no kinder. Missing persons logs from the U.S. Forest Service show that since 1940, more than 250 people have vanished around Shasta under unexplained circumstances. Some reappeared days later with no memory of where they had been. Others were never found. not even bones or clothing, despite full-scale search operations. The most famous case is that of 11-year-old David Paulides in the 1950s, who disappeared during a family outing near Shasta's lower trails. And according to reports, he was gone for 5 hours before being discovered miles away, high on a ridge he could not possibly have climbed alone, barefoot, with no scratches, no dirt, and no recollection of how he got there. His story is just one of dozens cataloged in the missing 411 files, cases that defy explanation, not only by geography, but by physics. Search dogs often refuse to track scent trails around Shasta, as if hitting a wall of invisible interference. Compasses spin, radios lose signal, and cameras return images blurred by streaks of light no human eye saw. What makes Shasta particularly sinister is the consistency of certain reports. Witnesses describe hearing subterranean humming, deep and resonant, as if the mountain itself were breathing electricity. Geologists scoff, attributing it to volcanic activity, yet the frequencies don't match magma resonance. Instead, they echo in harmonic intervals similar to those recorded near the Black Pyramid and Utah monolith. This suggests not random geology, but design, perhaps a network of resonators stretching across continents, with Shasta as one of its keystones. One researcher from Stanford, Dr. Ray Keller, claimed in a 1972 paper, since retracted, that seismic readings beneath Shasta mapped hollow chambers hundreds of meters wide. He was swiftly silenced, his grant revoked. His paper, though buried, described symmetry inconsistent with volcanic lava tubes, and concluded the chambers were architectural, not natural. Eyewitnesses add further dread. In 1980, a hiker named James Hughes reported stumbling upon what he described as a metallic door in the mountainside, partially concealed by brush, humming faintly to the touch. When he returned with companions days later, the door was gone, the slope completely natural, no seam or scar remaining. Others describe orbs of light circling the peak, darting into the mountain as if being swallowed. And in 2011, a group of campers filmed what appeared to be a triangular craft rising silently from the slopes at dawn, cloaked in distortion waves like heat haze. The video circulated briefly online before being deleted across multiple platforms. The group who uploaded it claimed their accounts were hacked, their emails wiped. Skeptics reduce these tales to hoaxes or folklore, but government interest tells another story. FOIA requests reveal that both the U.S. Geological Survey and Department of Energy conducted classified studies around Shasta in the late 70s, citing unexplained magnetic flux density. Why would energy officials be studying a mountain unless there was energy to harness? Theories swirl. Some say Shasta houses an ancient power station, others that it conceals a gateway, a portal into dimensions stacked just beyond human perception. If Dulce is a laboratory, perhaps Shasta is a temple, a node where energy converges, monitored by intelligences that prefer to remain unseen. The horror, however, lies not in the grandeur of these theories, but in the personal accounts of those who vanished. One recovered hiker, found wandering days later, whispered to rescuers about tall figures with no faces, who spoke without sound, instructing him not to look at the light. His shoes were gone, but his feet bore no cuts. His story was dismissed as delirium. Yet his GPS watch, recovered intact, showed that he had been stationary for 3 days, in a location hundreds of feet inside solid rock. Impossible, unless solid rock is not what it seems. Mount Shasta remains one of the most active disappearance zones in North America, and whether its heart holds Lemurians, government labs, Or something older still, the facts align with an ancient pattern. The hum, the resonance, the vanishing. Dulce may experiment, Shasta may guard, but both whisper the same truth to those who listen carefully. The earth's skin is thinner than we think, and something waits just beneath it, patient, calculating, and unbothered by our skepticism. Chapter 3: The Ominous Lights of Devil's Sea. If the Bermuda Triangle is the Atlantic's wound, then the Devil's Sea is its Pacific twin, a stretch of ocean off the coast of Japan, so infamous that Japanese fishermen refuse to speak of it, except in hushed tones, as though the sea itself might overhear. Located near the island of Miyakejima, this region has been plagued for centuries by vanishing ships, phantom lights, and waters that boil without cause. In the Edo period, records describe entire fishing fleets disappearing overnight, their nets and ropes found drifting days later, but no men left to haul them in. The Japanese government grew so concerned in the 1950s that it officially declared the area a danger zone, barring maritime traffic after the unexplained disappearance of several military vessels. One of those ships carried more than 700 crewmen. None returned. The official explanation: severe storms and natural hazards did little to pacify grieving families who knew the weather had been calm. The real explanation, whispered through naval channels, was more unsettling. The ships had sailed into a region where radar and radio failed, compasses spun in mad circles, and even the ocean itself seemed to pull vessels down into some unseen maw. The similarities to Bermuda are undeniable, yet there is something darker about the Devil's Sea. While the Bermuda Triangle offers sporadic incidents, the Devil's Sea seems to pulse with cycles, intervals when its activity surges, as though aligned with lunar or geomagnetic rhythms. Researchers at Tokyo University charted magnetic anomalies across the Pacific and found that the Sea of Japan's Dragon's Triangle sits directly opposite Bermuda on the globe, a perfect antipode, as though Earth itself were pierced through by some invisible axis. Ancient Japanese texts called the region Mano Umi, the Sea of the Devil, and described fiery dragons rising from the water to drag ships below. Modern sailors describe something not far off: massive columns of light piercing upward from beneath the surface, sometimes red, sometimes white, sometimes a sickly green that lingers like radiation. In 1963, an American freighter reported seeing a glowing dome rise from the sea at midnight, hovering in silence before plunging back beneath the waves. Its captain's log survives, stamped classified across every page, with marginal notes in U.S. Navy handwriting referencing USO activity, unidentified submerged objects. What unnerves researchers most are the electromagnetic disturbances. Between 1952 and 1954, Japanese scientists attempted to study the zone with unmanned vessels equipped with instruments. None returned intact. Wreckage later recovered showed evidence of extreme heat, steel beams bent as though softened, circuit boards fused into glass-like slag. Yet no volcanic activity was recorded. A U.S. declassified intelligence memo from the same period, uncovered decades later, admitted that the anomalies mimic directed energy sources, not geological origin. In other words, whatever boiled those ships came not from Earth's natural processes, but from a system or intelligence wielding energy like a weapon. The question, of course, is who or what operates such a system beneath the Pacific waves. Whispers from former Navy sonar operators suggest that the Devil's Sea is not empty at all, but densely populated below the surface. Sonar scans reveal moving objects larger than aircraft carriers, cruising at speeds exceeding 200 knots impossible for submarines. These objects perform maneuvers no machine should withstand. Right-angle turns at high velocity, sudden stops, silent ascents from depths of 3 miles. The sonar pings return surfaces that appear metallic, yet ripple like liquid when struck. Officially, such reports are attributed to false returns or thermal layers. Unofficially, some operators confide that they were instructed to stop logging anomalies altogether, their data rerouted to special projects. And then there are the disappearances. Entire squadrons of planes, fishing trawlers, cargo ships, lost without distress calls. In 1955, a Japanese research vessel named Kaiomaru No. 5 entered the Devil's Sea with 31 crew aboard. It vanished. Weeks later, fragments of hull washed ashore hundreds of miles away, charred as if from within. The investigation yielded nothing. Survivors? None. To this day, Japanese maritime officials quietly advise captains to skirt the region, though no law forbids entry. What's most chilling is that the few survivors who have stumbled back from its grip report a common detail: silence, radios dead, engines failing, the sea flattening into a mirror, followed by a low hum rising from beneath the water, a hum that shakes the bones, that drowns thought, until suddenly memory ends. If Dulce holds its laboratories beneath stone, and Shasta hides its chambers in volcanic rock, then the Devil's Sea may be the ocean's vault, not a laboratory, not a temple, but a corridor, a place where the seafloor is not solid, but engineered, resonating with energy fields designed to open something. Japanese legends say the dragons that dwell below were not monsters but guardians, keeping mankind from stumbling into realms it cannot survive. Perhaps those dragons were not beasts of scale and flame, but machines of obsidian metal, engines humming with resonance, enforcing borders humanity was never meant to cross. Chapter 4: The Phantom Signals of Rendlesham Forest. If the Devil's Sea belongs to the ocean, then Rendlesham Forest belongs to the silence of trees. Yet what happened there in the freezing nights of December 1980 remains one of the most documented UFO encounters in history. RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters, two twin NATO air bases in Suffolk, England, were home to American airmen when strange lights descended into the forest. Guards first thought it was a downed aircraft. What they found was something else. Multiple servicemen reported a glowing object hovering among the pines, metallic and triangular, radiating a faint blue and red light. When they approached, their radios cut out, their skin prickled as if charged with static, and the object lifted silently above the canopy before vanishing. 2 nights later, the lights returned. This time, Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt himself investigated, armed with radiation meters and tape recorders. His team followed the lights deep into the forest, documenting readings of radiation 3 times background levels at the exact spot where the craft had rested. On the tapes, still available today, Halt's voice trembles as he describes beams of light shooting down from the sky, illuminating the ground like searchlights from some colossal unseen vessel. He reports animals in the surrounding farms erupting into frenzy, barking, screeching, thrashing, as though something vast and invisible pressed down upon them. Halt's men saw not just lights, but structured craft, metallic, angular, with markings they could not decipher. One soldier claimed to have touched the hull and felt symbols carved into its surface, glowing faintly like heated glass. He sketched them later, interlocking triangles, circles within circles, the same patterns seen etched on the vault in Mexico's Silent Zone. The British Ministry of Defense quickly dismissed the incident as misidentified lighthouse beams from Orford Ness. Yet radiation reports, military tapes, and consistent testimonies from over 30 servicemen render that explanation absurd. FOIA requests decades later revealed memos from the MOD calling the case of defense significance and recommending it be downplayed to avoid public hysteria. More chilling are the details left out of official statements. Some airmen reported time lapses, minutes or hours unaccounted for. Others suffered nosebleeds, headaches, and recurring dreams of geometric corridors of light. One even claimed that during direct contact with the craft, he received binary code sequences in his mind, streams of ones and zeros that he transcribed in a notebook. Decades later, researchers translated those sequences into coordinates pointing to sites across the globe, pyramids in Egypt, the Nazca Lines, and yes, Mount Shasta. Rendlesham is often called Britain's Roswell, but the comparison misses its deeper horror. Roswell was debris. Rendlesham was contact. And what makes it terrifying is not only the craft itself, but its apparent intent. The beams of light, the binary downloads, the geometric symbols, they suggest not an accident, but communication. Communication not through words, but through resonance, geometry, energy. Just as the Black Pyramid pulses beneath Alaska, just as the Utah monolith vibrated with inaudible hums, Rendlesham presented humanity with the same message, carved in light and number, a reminder that our world is mapped, catalogued, and watched. And yet, despite overwhelming documentation, the incident was buried in ridicule. Witnesses were mocked, demoted, silenced. Halt himself, decades later, still swore that what he saw was real, that the lights were not from lighthouses, that beams did strike the ground, that something vast and structured lingered above the forest. The chilling part is the symmetry. Rendlesham lies along the same latitude band as other anomalies, including the Devil's Sea, as if all these scars, Alaska, Dulce, Shasta, Bermuda, Devil's Sea, Rendlesham, align across Earth like stitches in a wound. So now, friend, as the hour grows late and the lights around you dim, we step back from the details and look at the larger picture, though what we see may not comfort us. Across continents and oceans, across decades and centuries, the same pattern emerges: resonance, disappearance, geometry. The Black Pyramid beneath Alaskan ice, humming with Earth's telluric currents. Flight 1628, intercepted under its pulses. The Utah monolith, vibrating with frequencies close to Earth's natural heartbeat. West Virginia's voices whispering, "Do not return." The Mexican vault etched with interlocking triangles. Dulce's laboratories splicing flesh with silence. Mount Shasta's humming corridors. The Devil's Sea swallowing ships whole. Rendlesham's beams carving symbols into men's minds. And Nevada's convoy folded out of existence on a desert highway. Each scar aligns not randomly, but with uncanny precision, forming a lattice mapped across Earth. What if these are not separate mysteries, but pieces of one design? What if our planet is less a home and more a host, wired long before our species stood upright, its crust embedded with architecture we mistake for myth? The ancients spoke of gods, dragons, sky people. Modern science speaks of resonances, anomalies, interference. But strip away the language and the pattern remains. Something sleeps beneath us, or above us, or perhaps between us, using geometry as circuitry, resonance as power, and silence as its camouflage. We are left with questions, never answers. Why the pulses? Why the disappearances? Why the warnings whispered through static and dreams? Maybe these are not threats, but safeguards. Dragons keeping us from doors we cannot survive opening. Or maybe they are tests, and humanity has already stumbled too far. Either way, the truth hums beneath our feet, in our skies, across our seas, threading the world with invisible lines. So tonight, as you close your eyes, consider this: the hum you sometimes hear in silence, the flicker in your electronics, the shadow that bends just a little too sharply on your wall. What if these are not accidents? What if they are reminders that the lattice is always there, awake watching? And what if the only reason you are still here, safe in your bed, is because for now it chooses not to open? Rest well, traveler. The files are closed for tonight, but the resonance never sleeps.